welcome to South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio's live statewide coverage of primary election night 2026. I'm Gavin Jackson. The polls officially closed 1 hour ago and numbers are starting to come in, and we will bring you those as we get them over the next 2 hours. We have reporters at watch parties around the state, and we will have analysis for you as well. More on that in a moment. Like every election night, we only call races when the Associated Press calls them, and we are already having a few reports coming in since the polls closed at 7 p.m., but no official calls yet. So let's take a look at the latest results in the governor's race. Up first, the Republicans there. You can see, I'm trying to read that, screen with that right from this far away. It looks like Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette is coming in at 28%. Josh Kimbrell is at 1%, even though he's out of the race officially. So yeah, I can read those there too. So it looks like Alan Wilson is in second there at 25%. And coming in at 3% is Ron Brady, the Low Country businessman, at 18%, edging out 5th District Congressman Ralph Norman and 1st District Congresswoman Nancy Mace right there coming in at 5th right now. It's still very early, but let's jump over to the Democratic gubernatorial candidates where we see Jermaine Johnson at 58%. That's State Rep Jermaine Johnson. Mullins McLeod at 11%. He's a Charleston lawyer. And then upstate businessman Billy Webster at 31%. So it looks like it's that race between Jermaine Johnson and Billy Webster. And it's super interesting because just a week ago we were in the same studio talking about what was going on here and seeing that debate between those three candidates as well. So a lot going on here when we're looking at the races going on. And we have another contested race, the Republican Attorney General's race. We have Stephen Goldfinch, State Senator Stephen Goldfinch out of Georgetown at 44%. We have 1st Circuit Solicitor David Pasco at 26% and David Stubbo, the 8th Circuit Solicitor, at 30%. So a lot going on there with the Attorney General race, which we also had a debate on as well. And this primary election, of course, determines which candidates from each party will appear on the November ballot. And there are some big statewide races like we just talked about, including the governor's race and the 6 statewide constitutional officers, including Secretary of State, State Treasurer, Attorney General, Comptroller General, Commissioner of Agriculture, don't forget that one, and Superintendent of Education. Also on the ballot is the U.S. Senate seat held by Senator Lindsey Graham, as well as all 124 state house districts. So only people off this ballot right now are the 46 state senators. They are up next year. Not next year, in 2028, I suppose. We have our presidential election year. They follow with them. Now, there are some key races that we'll be watching. We just saw those graphics, including the highlights on this Democrat and Republican races for the governor, as well as the AG's race. And we're going to be watching those turnout numbers as well. Now, tonight, just so you know, not every single incumbent faces a primary challenge or even a general election challenge come November. Some incumbents face challengers tonight, but not in November, which is what makes primaries so important when it comes to having your voice heard. Now, polls closed an hour ago, and like we said, results are still coming in. We'll be updating those throughout the night, as well as looking at turnout, because it's always interesting to see how many folks turn out during these primaries, because it is typically lower than we see in the general election, of course, as well as presidential election years too. But we did see record-breaking early voting numbers from the State Election Commission, totaling 319,580 votes over that 2-week span. In fact, 58% of those early ballots cast were for the Democratic Party, something party officials are very excited about that we'll be talking about as well. But there are key differences here in the 2026 early voting period compared to previous primaries and early voting turnout. And that is that several of these races are wide open statewide races, like we're talking about the governor's race, attorney general, the agriculture commissioner race, all those on the ballot really driving some turnout like folks haven't seen in years past. And we'll have plenty more to say about all of this in the 2 hours that we have together. But I want to note our reporters in the field that we'll be speaking with tonight, including Victoria Hanson at Republican Attorney General Alan Wilson's watch party here in Columbia. We have Rochelle Dean at Democratic Representative Jermaine Johnson's watch party in Hopkins, and Reagan Knight at Republican Lieutenant Governor Pam Evans' event in Greenville. We'll be going to those out in the field. But we also have our trusted and good source, good friend here with us, Winthrop University Political Science Professor Dr. Scott Huffman. He's not with us in the studio, sadly, but he is with us remotely, and he'll be giving us analysis of these races and these numbers as they come in. So, Scott, let's go ahead and kick it off with you. You saw those early numbers coming in. It's still, again, a lot of precincts haven't reported. We assume that this is a lot of the early voting numbers coming in. What are your takeaways right now when you see those numbers, when you have Evette, Wilson, and Reddy coming in third right there? Well, we've been talking a lot about Congressman Ralph Norman in this race.
Well, when I saw that, I started to wonder where those numbers were coming in from, how many of the ballots were from the Charleston area, how many were from York County, what percentage of the York County precincts had been reported, what percentage in the Low Country. So early on, when it looks like you have a lot of movement or you have a surprise, sometimes, in fact, frequently, that's because of who has reported and who hasn't. So what looks early on like a volatile race is really just kind of below the surface bubbles that are mainly a result of who reports and who doesn't. And a lot of states around the country have areas that in their state that are notorious, and every single election, they're the last ones to report. Not that I'm pointing any fingers in South
No.
Carolina, but you gotta pay attention to who's reporting their results before you start claiming there's going to be some large upset. There may be, but we got to keep an eye on who's reporting.
Gotcha, Scott. And before I jump over to Victoria, I just want to get your observation about this race, specifically the governor's race. Like we're saying, it's wide open. We haven't seen this since 2018 when Governor McMaster ran for his first full term, when he had Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evan on his running mate too. Now she's running for this race with his endorsement, President Trump's endorsement, and of course a lot of other well-known factors in this race too. When you look at those numbers, and I know we're saying they're still early too, would you say that that Evan has really made up some ground here? Do you think it's those endorsements? Do you think it's her just crisscrossing the state? Because that was always her biggest liability compared to the Nancy Maces, the Ralph Normans, and the Alan Wilsons of the world when it came to getting some traction in this race.
Yeah, and name recognition was an issue for her as well. As you know, the fact is she ran on a ticket and was elected statewide. But the truth is, you go around the country and say to somebody on the corner, name your lieutenant governor. And the fact is, they have trouble doing it. So she spent a lot of her time and money early on getting the name recognition that other candidates already had. That said, she should have also seen a significant bump from that Trump endorsement, like we've seen in some previous races. Now, in more recent races, we've seen the Trump endorsement in a primary might not be as shiny of gold as it was in the past, but there is so much backstory going around about that Trump endorsement, whether it's true or not, conspiracy theory or not, begins not to matter if it was in the forefront of the minds of the voters. So a lot of folks expected whoever Trump jumps in behind, that's it. It's going to shoot them to the top. And while she has been rising, we didn't see a meteoric jump as soon as that official Trump endorsement came in. And I think we all know there's a lot of backstory to that.
Yeah, it did seem like it kind of gave a bit of a thud instead of a splash for a lot of folks. And it seemed like it breathed a lot of life into these other campaigns too. And I was talking to some staffers on some of the other campaigns who are like, oh, we have, we're not looking for our jobs quite yet here because we have this, degree of hope. But of course, we heard from the governor. We also heard from the lieutenant governor saying that there was never any deal between them to get Governor McMaster's son, Henry D. Jr., on that ticket. That's what the governor said. You're entitled to your opinion, but not the facts. And we heard that derided, of course, from the four other opponents who said, well, we think otherwise. And of course, perspective, can be reality in these situations, especially in politics. So we know, especially when we look about how Governor McMaster got into his position too, with, endorsing President Donald Trump or candidate Trump back in 2016, being the first statewide elected officials to do so. And then Trump, hit him back too by moving then Governor Nikki Haley up to the UN, and Lieutenant Governor Henry McMaster became governor, the 117th governor of the state of South Carolina.
And, there was also the fact that Henry McMaster just seemed to have no stomach, no desire to call the legislature back to do redistricting. Trump said it wanted to happen. McMaster called him back. So that was sort of the beginning of, is there a backroom deal? True or not? It's, again, perception trumps reality. Pun not intended, but I think a good one. Perception trumps reality in this case. And then when Trump came out and said, as we all know, that Henry McMaster Jr. is going to be her running mate, and he, of course, has withdrawn, then everybody who wanted to see a conspiracy saw not just the outlines, but the full featured figures of a conspiracy.
All right, Scott, we're going to leave that talking point there for right now. Of course, that's been dominating the race these past couple of days when we saw that endorsement come out May 29th from the president when he mentioned, again, Henry D. McMaster as a running mate. Then we saw The junior actually announced that he was not going to be on the ticket last week. So, but again, that's taken a lot of oxygen out of this race and given some other folks some oxygen as well. Speaking of those getting some oxygen, we're going to jump over to the Attorney General's watch party where Victoria Hanson is with Attorney General Alan Wilson and his team out there here in Columbia. It's going to be a pretty rowdy scene from what I understand, but we know that he's been also crisscrossing the state as well on his bus tour, just like these other candidates have over these past few days. Barnstorming, getting out in all the small towns and big cities alike across the state to get as many votes as possible right now. So if we can jump over to Victoria Hanson and see what's going on there at the Wilson Watch Party.
Hey, good evening, Gavin. Yes, I'm at Market on Main Street in downtown Columbia where Alan Wilson's watch party is going on behind me. It's partially inside, it's partially outside, but the media is definitely being kept outside. However, I am told that this is where Alan Wilson will make remarks later tonight, if in fact he does so. And as you mentioned, the polls have been really close. But Wilson has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of support most recently from his opponent who dropped out, State Senator Josh Kimbrell. But the big endorsement he did not get, which you just mentioned, a big round of applause. I'll have to find out what that's about. But the big endorsement you mentioned he did not get is that of President Donald Trump. Wilson has pretty much brushed it off. It went to his opponent, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. But he basically brushed it off saying that a Trump endorsement raised people's expectations, but not necessarily her chances of winning. And I heard you and Scott talking about name recognition. Alan Wilson definitely has that, especially since he was prosecuting the Alec Murdaugh trial. I just ran into a couple of his teammates that were part of prosecuting that trial. They were walking into the watch party. And also I can tell you that I'm told that Wilson is watching these votes come in. I'm told he's watching with friends, family, close advisors. And of course, this is where we will be throughout the night as those numbers come in, and perhaps hearing from Alan Wilson later tonight. Back to you, Gavin.
Great. Thank you so much, Victoria. And of course, we're looking at those numbers and we'll bring those to you in a moment. But the big takeaway here for folks to understand is that, you know, when you have this many candidates in a race and you need to get 50% of the vote plus one vote in order to forego a runoff. And right now it's very tight between Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette and Attorney General Alan Wilson. We're just talking about 4 points right here with only 23% of the vote in. So it looks like we're going to a runoff as a lot of people have been expecting. Of course, these numbers will fluctuate still very early, but trying to get to 50% right now is going to be a bit tricky. But let's jump over to the Democrats and meet up with Rochelle Dean, who is with State Representative Jermaine Johnson's campaign here in Hopkins. Hey, Rochelle, how's it going down there?
Yeah, Gavin, we are here at St. John Baptist Church in Hopkins, South Carolina, where Representative Jermaine Johnson's watch party is taking place. And we have slowly over the last hour seen the gymnasium here start to fill up. A lot of people that are rooting for him and hoping for what they are calling a new SC. They say they're ready for change. We just a moment ago heard from Mayor McGirt from Latta, South Carolina, and he, as the first black mayor of South Carolina in 130 years, says it's time to pass the baton now to Representative Johnson as he runs for governor. He has already made history being the second black nominee to run for governor here in South Carolina, and he wants to take it even further now by actually winning this nomination. I've talked to a lot of the people who are here tonight, and they tell me that Representative Johnson is truly a person for the people. They say that he says something and he's going to do it. And one thing they say stands out is that he really stands for accessibility, for affordability, as well as accountability. If he can take those three things and use them on the platform, that's what they want to see. They say they want to see a new South Carolina, but they also want to see people who are in office that do what they say they are going to do. We're getting ready to have him come here in the building within the next 30 minutes. We'll be back to bring you some speech. And just a moment ago, we also got the first update on some of those first poll numbers coming in. At that time, they said about 21% of those numbers were coming in. And after that, they said about 58% of that vote put that Representative Johnson in the lead. So we are watching those poll numbers as they come in. We will see him as he arrives shortly. And as for now, we'll turn it back over to you, Gavin.
Great, thanks, Rochelle. And I think it's super interesting to point out, too, that, we did see Representative Jermaine Johnson, who's been representing the lower Richland County district since 2020. He's really, gained a lot of momentum in the State House. He's had a lot of viral moments there, and that's really transcended him onto the campaign trail he's been trying to leverage into this run since he launched it last October. It's been interesting because, there have been some difficult moments on this campaign trail when you talk about his fundraising numbers, which only came about to $500,000 for this cycle. As well as just, how the outreach has been going with that limited funding and not being on TV like opponent Billy Webster or other advertising like Mullins McLeod, that Charleston lawyer who's right now sitting right there in third place. But we are seeing, like Rochelle said, those strong numbers for Jermaine already with about 40% of the vote, and he's right there at like 59% of the vote. So when we're talking about avoiding a runoff, this will be the race to watch and the storyline for Jermaine Johnson right now, if he can hold that lead and keep that up and avoid a runoff and really best Billy Webster, who's dumped hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into this race, jumping into the race in late March compared to Jermaine Johnson's entry in last October and, of course, Mullins McLeod earlier last year. But let's jump up to Reagan Knight, who's up in Greenville at Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evans' watch party. Reagan, what's going on up there? How are things going? Of course, it's neck and neck between the Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General Alan Wilson right now. It's still very early.
Yeah, Gavin, that's right. And right now, the atmosphere here in downtown Greenville is very calm, but also serious too. The campaign, I believe, does feel that they are going to head to a runoff between Alan Wilson. We have the numbers up behind us in the left-hand corner behind me. We're seeing the numbers actually kind of flip back and forth between Alan Wilson and the Lieutenant Governor. We don't know if McMaster is going to be here tonight. And, of course, also, as you know, Gavin, her choice for Lieutenant Governor, President Trump recently talked about McMaster's son, is no longer going to be her lieutenant governor. So we're hoping to hear tonight when she does speak, if it does go to runoff, who her lieutenant governor may be and possibly see the governor himself tonight. But again, the atmosphere here is very lively. It is very calm. There is even an outdoor space over to my right, and everybody is out there congregating, and there's still people coming in. And but the atmosphere right now is very lively, but they believe it to head to a runoff between Alan Wilson, as we've seen the poll numbers go back and forth between the two. Gavin?
Gotcha. Thank you, Reagan. We appreciate it. I love that we have everyone all over the state covering some of these big names out there. But we got a big name in the studio right here with us, SCGOP Chairman Drew McKissick. Thank you for making time, Drew. It's a busy day. Kind of give us your take on what you're seeing from these numbers right now. Obviously, the party's not endorsing anyone. You guys do that when you have a nominee. But what are your thoughts on how this is shaking out?
It's a competitive race, no doubt about it. We've had at least 5 candidates out there who've been running really for the better part of 8 months. And I mean, they've been out there finding volunteers, raising money, getting activists on their campaigns. And people have become really, bought in and invested into one candidate or another, which, so it doesn't surprise me to see things, I don't want to say trench warfare, but to really kind of become static is the way it has been for the last, I'd say, even 2 months almost, really, other than after Ron Reddy got into the race. And, of course, spent a lot of money, and you saw some numbers begin to move. But look, I mean, they're campaigning hard. The nomination is worth having, obviously. You got a lot of strong candidates and very competitive, and we're known for brass knuckles and sharp elbows in South Carolina politics.
And it seems like they've come out recently in the past 2 weeks, and some dirty tricks too. I mean, we've seen some negative text messages go out, anonymous text messages attacking Ron Reddy. Unfortunately, with a racial tinge there too. We saw some protester situation going on up there in Greer yesterday. Where's that for the Lieutenant Governor Pam Evett? What do you make of that? Is that, again, just the unfortunate reputation of South Carolina blood sport politics?
Well, it's been that way since before I got involved, a long time. And I mean, it's, again, it's a little bit different in South Carolina than it is in a lot of other states, but again, very competitive. And I think, though, that at the end of the day, as I look back on, our progress as a party in South Carolina, I look at how successful the party's been able to be with candidates who have come out of that competitive process. So it has led to very good, solid campaigns, competitive candidates who do well and put the fundamentals together, the raising money, the organization, and getting out the message and so forth, that they just become better because of that process.
I was going to say, because sometimes there's, we talk about the warring factions within your party, and of course the Democratic Party too, there's differences.
Sure.
You do think that makes everyone stronger in the end? I mean, especially when we talk about like state house races, House Freedom Caucus versus incumbents, and the SCGOP, just the regular caucus there too.
I mean, like, competition, makes people more stronger, better, and competition is good. We're free market, in that sense, but we take it a step further and we take it to our campaigns, I guess you would say. But again, it's a nomination worth having. I think that's why you see such strong competition. and so many more candidates, not just for governor, but on the rest of the way down the ballot.
But when we talk about competition, you're also concerned about basically preserving that competition just for each party. And we talk about closed primaries, you talk about that lawsuit you guys are launching to get some momentum moving there with that legislation. Tell me why you want closed primaries when we're talking about competition.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, Republicans should be picking Republican candidates. Republicans should be running for a Republican nomination. I mean, the most important thing that a political party can do is pick someone to represent them on the ballot, to speak for them. So when we go do that most important thing that we do, it should be limited to people who affiliate with the Republican Party.
Drew, when we talk about people that affiliate with the party, we talk about transplants. And a bad word, but a good word. We have a few. I'm one of them, 15 years strong here. But when we talk about...
You got here as quick as you could.
I did it. I don't tell anyone about it. Hey, I'm from Maryland. I like to say we're still the South, but I never claimed it growing up until now. That being said, you look at Horry County, you look at Georgetown, you look at the coast, we're talking Hilton Head, Bluffton, Charleston, and even other parts. I mean, we're seeing that growth expand out to the point where a lot of people are like, we don't want any more growth, too. But when we look at the people coming in, and everyone's always like, oh, is South Carolina going to go red? I mean, blue, is it going to change like North Carolina and Georgia? And we always have this conversation, and just kind of update me now based on what you've been seeing and the numbers of the voters coming in.
I mean, every 3 to 4 months, we get the data file, the registered voter file in South Carolina, and we work with the RNC to have that file bumped against new movers. So we can see the new movers who come into the state who have a background of participating in Republican primaries, or maybe they were a registered Republican and so forth, and also who were the Democrats. And then we look at the plus and the minus. What is it? Net negative, net positive. And it is net Republicans who are moving into South Carolina, primarily along the coast, as you point out, but also around Greenville, the South Charlotte area, and so forth. Here in Richland County, for instance, is net Democrats moving into Richland County. Horry County is ruby red, with a lot of retirees, from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or other places that are moving to Myrtle Beach. Same thing all the way down to Hilton Head. But on the whole, it is net Republicans who are moving into the state.
When you look at the Trump endorsement, he also endorsed for several other candidates. We're talking about Joe Wilson in the second. We're talking about William Timmons up in the fourth. Even the Ag Commissioner Cody Simpson right there. Interesting to see him kind of get involved in those races, but also with Evitt. What did you make of that in terms of putting your political analyst hat on, not your party chairman hat on, in terms of how you thought that endorsement played out?
Well, again, as we pointed out a minute ago, these candidates have been going at it for since the start of football season, really. I mean, that's when the ads first started. I mean, so they've been running prior to that, finding local folks to get on board their campaign, sheriff's endorsements, other things like that. So they were dug in for a long time. Endorsements, they do make a difference. Obviously, you'd rather have the endorsement than not have the endorsement, particularly with the president. But the later you get in the process, the more people get dug into their opinions, and the less it may move numbers. And I would say particularly when you're talking about a multi-candidate race, maybe then let's take the Cornyn Paxton race out in Texas, for instance. He came in late in that race but endorsed Paxton. Made a bigger difference. Here though, again, you've got a lot of folks who have just been dedicated to a certain candidate or another for a long time now.
Drew, also before I let you go, just talking about some of the tactics, some of the strategies we've seen some of the candidates use, specifically Ron Reddy, who jumped in, right at the beginning of filing in March when some other candidates have already been in the race for 6-7 months at that point. Obviously, he was doing Doja SC last year too, and kind of laying some of the groundwork there too. But you see him right now neck and neck with Ralph Norman, who's been well known. What do you make of that? I mean, are we seeing the two lanes separate here between Evan and Wilson and Norman, Reddy and Mays?
Yeah, maybe to a degree. And I know Reddy actually had the campaign where he talked about the different lanes.
Yeah,
the
here we are, the two lanes.
But in reality, there are different lanes to run. Sure. I mean, you're an outsider, you're not an outsider, and so forth. You saw a lot of, I think, Reddy and Norman competing for the outsider label. And Reddy particularly spending a lot of money to try to get that label. So, it doesn't surprise me to see things beginning to break out the way they are. I mean, in the lieutenant governor's favor, you're the lieutenant governor. You've been lieutenant governor for 8 years now. Alan Wilson's been our attorney general for longer than that. Both of them have name recognition, and also have history in the local party around the state. In Ralph's case, he was in one congressional district versus being statewide, so that's a little bit different. And Reddy, as you point out, just jumped in and has been running a huge ad campaign. So, I mean, but there's an appetite for the outsider lane, and that's why you saw him fight for it.
And we just saw some news that Congressman Jim Clyburn's going to, of course, be the nominee for the 6th Congressional District as the Democrat. Of course, breaking news, shocking news. No, let's use that to talk quickly about redistricting and how that kind of came to be, that last-minute push that we saw at the end of session as a result of the April 29th Supreme Court decision, Louisiana v. Calais. Talking about the racial gerrymander happening in Louisiana versus the partisan political gerrymander in South Carolina when it came to RMAP back in the 2024 ruling. Do you think that was really worth all that effort to kind of see that it didn't make it through the Senate despite everyone's intentions?
I mean, at the end of the day, when you look back on things, in hindsight's 2020. I mean, they would have been much better off if they would have really started the push earlier. Sure. Because the problem is, it's not that they didn't have the votes, in my opinion. They could have got there. I believe the problem was when you're watching early votes be cast the day that you're potentially voting on it, presents a little bit of a problem. And the Democrats obviously focused on that because that would give them tens of thousands of potential complainants in a lawsuit, because inevitably there would be a federal lawsuit. And if people had already early voted, they would have an injury and they could, have a federal complaint. So, I get the strategy, but, earlier would have been better.
Do you think that's going to backfire? I mean, we did see 58% of that early vote being Democrats casting ballots. Do you think that's going to carry over into November? Any concerns with the midterms here?
I think you saw a lot of the Democrats robbing primary day in favor of early voting, specifically to make the case that I just mentioned. Gotcha. I think that was probably most of what was going on there.
All right, Drew McKissick, State GOP Party Chairman, thank you so much. We're going to get some new numbers here as we continue to watch the results come in. It's been about an hour and a half since polls have closed here. And of course, that governor's race is still neck and neck. And we're going to see some numbers in a quick moment here, hopefully, before we go back. Thank you. And you go Drew. We're still looking at Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett in the lead there, about 28%. And of course, following her is Attorney General Alan Wilson at 26%. And Ron Reddy and Ralph Norman are battling out for third and fourth place, with 5th District Congressman Ralph Norman there at 17%. They're fluctuating back and forth too, and I'm seeing it's about like 34% of the vote is in. So again, still pretty split there when it comes to the possibility of a runoff, really looking like that right now. And of course, it's still very early. We can't tell you who's going to be in that runoff yet, but right now it's neck and neck with Evett and Wilson. Jumping over the Democrats, we see Representative Jermaine Johnson still holding strong at that 58% lead there over Billy Webster, the upstate businessman, at 32%. Really kind of an interesting race right here. We're going to be interested to hear from Jermaine Johnson when we get to Rochelle later today to hear what he has to say about that, because I think a lot of people might have counted Jermaine out of this race, especially after we saw Billy Webster jumping in and dumping a lot of money into this TV advertising, something that Jermaine was not able to do. And instead, I think working off of his name recognition and some of his activities in the House and, of course, some of his viral moments. Jumping to the Attorney General's race, this is also the hottest race we're going to be watching too. Really split three ways here, as there are three candidates, with Senator Stephen Goldfinch at 42%, edging out there 8th Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo and 1st Circuit Solicitor David Pasco at 25%. That's Pasco, and Stumbo at 33%. And of course, there's no clear winner there, so there possibly a runoff as well. Commissioner of Agriculture, we're looking at let's see, Cody Simpson there at 39% and Danny Ford at 36%. And Fred West, who had the endorsement of outgoing Commissioner Hugh Weathers at 11% and Jeremy Cannon at 14%. It's worth noting that Cody Simpson got that coveted endorsement from President Donald Trump, who actually kind of encouraged him to run, even though we could all say that he was probably going to do that anyway. But he was encouraged to run by the president. Also got that endorsement from his former boss, Governor Henry McMaster. He was his executive assistant for several years. Looking at the Senate race here, too, a lot of folks were concerned or are actually asking questions whether Lindsey Graham might get pulled into a runoff, something that we have never seen happen in the state's history since he's actually been in the Senate, replacing Strom Thurmond there. And Graham is at 59% to Mark Lynch at 27%. Again, still very early data right there. Looking at the Democrat side of the U.S. Senate race, Dr. Annie Andrews coming in strong at 62%. To Brandon Brown at 30% and Cal Freeman at 8%. So we're going to go Victoria Hanson right now, who's again at Attorney General Alan Wilson's watch party here in Columbia to see what's going on. Hey, Victoria.
Hey, Gavin. Yes, it's getting a little rowdy here at the watch party for Alan Wilson. And Wilson has gotten a lot of support from sheriffs across the state. I've talked to sheriffs in the Lowcountry support him, and I just met Max Dorsey, Chester County Sheriff's Office. And tell me a little bit about why you support Alan Wilson.
Well, Victoria, Alan Wilson is the law and order candidate. 80% of the sheriffs in South Carolina, Republican sheriffs in South Carolina, support Alan Wilson for governor. We're excited down here at his watch party tonight. We're excited to see these returns come in. We're being positive we're confident that Alan Wilson is going to be our next governor for the state of South Carolina.
What is it about Wilson that sheriffs like?
So he has stood with us from day one, serving as the state's longest attorney general. We know what to expect from him. Most importantly, we know his character. We know what kind of heart he has. He's a battle-tested military veteran, a proven prosecutor, and he is in South Carolina safer because of his time as the attorney general, and I know he's going to do just as good and better as our governor.
What is the watch party like inside? I can see people holding up the posters, very excited, but since the media is out here, tell us a little about the mood inside the watch party.
So everyone's on their phones, watching that data as it comes in, checking all of the social media websites, and watching TV and enjoying good food, good fellowship. So we're going to be here till it's called tonight.
Well, I'll let you get back to the good food and the good fellowship and all that entails. And thank you so much. So nice to meet you, Mr. Dorsey, and appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
All right, so there you go. You just heard from one of the many in law enforcement that support Alan Wilson. We will stay here at the watch party on, we're here on Main Street in Columbia, Market on Main Street, I should say, reporting live throughout the night. Back to you, Gavin.
Thanks, Victoria. I want some food and fellowship too. We had some pizza before, but it's going to be a long night here too as we watch these returns come in. I also want to mention that I was up in Greenville, actually Greer, on Saturday with Attorney General Alan Wilson and his campaign. We also saw, Greenville County Sheriff Hobart Lewis there with him too. Again, really flexing his law enforcement muscle there and all the endorsements he's had from so many sheriffs and law enforcement from around the state. So something interesting and worth noting there when it comes to how Wilson has been leveraging his career as Attorney General to, again, expand his network, just like we're seeing Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette doing that as the governor's running mate for the past 8 years and using his network as well as the endorsement from President Donald Trump to gain that traction too. So that's really why we're seeing this neck and neck race here between the two of them. Very well-known names in the state. Very interesting to see that play out. But we're going to go back over to Scott Huffman and see, Scott, if you had any takeaways from what we were talking to Drew McKissick about in terms of how this race has been playing out, and also when it comes to what we're seeing with voters coming to our state and how these numbers are still kind of tracking the way that we typically see them track around now.
Well, first, let me quibble a little bit. We are not South Charlotte. We are Rock Hill, South Carolina, and York County, South Carolina. That SC does not stand for South Charlotte. We're proud South Carolinians. He makes a point that I don't think a lot of people pay attention to about closed primaries. If you look at the history of states, when a party is on the ascension, they tend to want open primaries because they want to draw people into their party. But when they have dominance, as the Republican Party does now, they want to push for closed primaries. So we see this dynamic playing out in South Carolina right now. It's been really interesting, but it follows a historic track. Mm-hmm. The points about the gubernatorial race, I think, were well made. You have several candidates that appeal to different sectors of the state, that have completely different bases that they operate from, that attempt to go from the outside. We saw that worked well for Donald Trump, running as the outsider, the business outsider. Rom Reddy with his SC Doge. And again, as Drew talked about, the various lanes. So you see several people occupying the same lane. And the truth is about the bare knuckle politics, all that, all the cliches, they're true in South Carolina. And they are nowhere more evident in 2026 than in a primary, because no matter what they say, all of these candidates pretty much agree on policy, which means the only way you can show a difference between you and other candidates is to kind of impugn their character, to go after them with ad hominem attacks. So we see that pretty brutally in South Carolina. And these primaries where it would be tough for an individual candidate to get over that 50% threshold, you see a lot of those elbows in that kind of race.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, like we were talking to Drew about, it seems like sometimes it's kind of taken a back seat, like I guess maybe because it is such an open primary for so many of these positions, specifically the governor's race, that we haven't seen such nastiness. I feel like we haven't seen like that in some recent time. But of course, we're seeing these, racially infused and the innuendo And these anonymous texts focused on Ron Reddy, who's of Indian and Italian descent, who's immigrated to America as a legal citizen here, being targeted at him, and then also some of the rhetoric that we're seeing from his opponents too when it comes to even policy issues on immigrants. It's hard to understand, what's happening with the misdirection perhaps, and who could be fueling these text messages and these concerns.
Yeah, I just in the past few minutes tracked down some of the text messages that I got, and they're not easy to find. You have to look at what is said in the text message, go to that, scroll to the bottom, try and find a name of a political action committee, go to the Federal Election Commission website, put in that political action committee, and only then can you see who they were. I just got a very nasty text against Lindsey Graham, and I wanted to see who it came from. And I had to track it down to Courageous Conservatives PAC. And they hadn't even filed that they had been helping Lindsey Graham's opponents. So these text messages are nothing new in campaigns, but they are being used in a new way, in a very new, vicious way. And, for all of us who tend to watch things streaming these days or online, this is a great reason to watch SCE TV so that you aren't constantly interrupted by some of these vicious ads that streaming services have to plug in. So the way television, quote unquote, ads are being inserted are different, even though it's the same concept as a television ad. And the use of text messages has taken on a sharper point than they have in past elections.
Yeah, Scott, thank you for the plug there. We didn't pay him to say that. It's just the truth. We're commercial free for 2 hours straight. No one else is offering this kind of coverage on air, so you're welcome, South Carolina. Also, when it comes to that, Scott, let's stick with the Graham race because it's super interesting. We were talking about that a minute ago. Graham started this back in 2002. He's running for his 5th Senate term right now. When Strom Thurmond was bowing out, Graham was already in Congress, ran unopposed in 2002. But ever since then, he's had challengers, and he's blown right through them, including back in 2014, which was probably the most contentious one, the most vulnerable one a lot of people talk about, when you had people like Lee Bright, who's now senator again, Richard Cash, who's the senator from Anderson, Nancy Mace, now congresswoman. It was a huge race. I think it was like 7-person primary, and he won it with 56% of the vote. And now we're talking about Mark Lynch. And a lot of the advertising that not just, Lynch has been throwing at Graham. There's been some billboards I saw on the update, but Graham's been throwing a lot of mailers at him too, spending a lot of money, and people think that he's vulnerable. There's been some polling that shows that he might get dragged into a runoff. What is your takeaway from this? Do you think that polling's accurate, or do you think Graham prevails again with that Trump endorsement that he's had for years now?
Yeah, the ads and flyers against Lynch have been just as vicious. Let's be clear there. Lindsey Graham is obviously popular among Republicans. Anybody who says he isn't is wrong. However, he is the least popular statewide Republican among Republicans. And anybody who says that's not true is wrong. So he is popular among Republicans, but his popularity is not as high as Tim Scott's, is not as high as Henry Masters. It was never as high as Nikki Haley's. So, that has always given him the sheen of vulnerability, but he has always come through it before because he has known which way the political wind blows. If you track his approval ratings, for example, over time among Republicans, they were high, but they weren't sky high. All of a sudden, he becomes Trump's attack dog in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, and his approval ratings skyrocket. He knows which way to hoist his sails. Now, the question is, has he sailed into more turbulent waters than he expected? Everybody constantly talks about Lindsey Graham being vulnerable, but he has shown each time that he has been able to pull it off. Will he be able to this time? He is ahead. He doesn't look like he's going to be as decisive as he has been in the past, but he could easily pull it off. That said, a lot of the state hasn't voted. Although Lindsey Graham has had, with only a quarter of Greenville County reporting, he has the lowest number in his home county than in any other county that's reporting. across the state. So we have to see how it plays out. But, this lead could be eaten into, but getting him below that 50% is going to be tough. But it is absolutely not an impossible feat.
Gotcha. And I want to stick with the Senate really quick, but we have some we have some AP news here out of the 1st Congressional District with that. The Democrats in that race. We see Nancy LaCour, who's the former chief of the Navy Reserve. She's advanced to a runoff with Mac DeFord. He's also in there too. The two top names out of that. Again, there's 7 Democrats in that race, Scott. Again, another one of these wide open races because Nancy Mace is no longer running for the 1st Congressional District. That's this race right here. So we got it wide open on both sides. The Democrats vying for the nomination. Looks like those two will be in a sprint for the next 2 weeks. And we'll be getting to the 10 Republicans in that race shortly too at some point. But what do you make of this too? Again, we saw Nancy LaCour kind of drop into this race. She was fired by Pete Hegseth, the Department of Defense Secretary, back in 2025, presumably for just being a woman, like we've seen some minorities being fired over at DOD too. But she's been career military. She's a mom of 6, several of whom are in the military as well. Career military woman. Also with Mac DeFord, who was a Coast Guard veteran, Citadel grad, and Charleston School of Law grad. And also general counsel for the town of Hilton Head. So interesting matchup right there, kind of what we expected. But again, there was 7 Democrats in that race. Just kind of goes to show just how popular that district is, and maybe the greatest hope for Democrats outside of the 6th Congressional, which we know is hardcore Democrat.
Yeah, the first is they're going to give them a run for their money, even though it is definitely an uphill battle. But let's take that race and then the components of that race. It's so many people competing in the Democratic primary, and pull back and look at the fact that Democrats are contesting so many of these races. They're proud of the fact that in the general election, they plan on contesting all 124 state house seats. Now, if I remember correctly from the last cycle, 60% of the state house seats went uncontested in the general election. So even if everything's an uphill battle for Democrats in most elections in South Carolina right now, this shows the amount of organizing they've been doing. They went from a shallow bench to a much deeper bench, and all you have to do is look at contests like the 1st District and see how many decent Democratic candidates have shown up and put in the work. So no, we're not going to see a surge of Democrats with surprising wins in the general election. But there is no way to look at this and say, hey, the Democratic Party isn't growing. They are growing because they're growing their bench of experienced candidates. They have put the work in. And of course, the Republicans are dominant, but this is the kind of thing that makes them say, hey, we have to do everything, whether it's redistricting, gerrymandering, whatever, to keep them further in our rear view mirror. So there are some dynamics that are happening that make people think about the context of the party and how they're growing and the directions they're choosing.
Yeah, and a lot to digest there in the 1st Congressional District too. And should note that Mac DeFord was also running in the 2024 primary, but he lost to Michael B. Moore very closely. So he leaned into that race heavily, and now he's advancing to that runoff with Nancy LaCour in the 1st District Democratic primary. So we'll see them on June 23rd on the ballot. But now we're going to go to another Democrat, Jermaine Johnson's watch party with Rochelle Dean. Jermaine Johnson is leading here right now in the nomination for the Democratic gubernatorial primary. Rochelle, what's going on there in Hopkins?
Hey, Gavin, we are still out here in Hopkins, South Carolina at St. John Baptist Church waiting for Representative Jermaine Johnson to arrive. From what I understand, his children just got here not too long ago. But as you can hear, it is a party happening here tonight. We're joined right now with Debbie Billing from Columbia, and she does a lot of volunteer work and works at the State House. First of all, thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you so much. I wouldn't be anywhere else tonight.
And you say that holding this sign with pride. Tell me what it was about Representative Johnson that resonated with you.
So as governor, he is a real person. He cares about people. You can talk to him. He's bilingual. I have seen him in action at the State House, and he's got this warmth and this genuineness. He truly cares about people and issues. He's able to negotiate. He's able to, he's the kind of person we want in government, right? Not like showy, not about the money. It's about what people in South Carolina need and want. It's not just about what we need, it's what we want, right?
It should exactly be that when anybody is running, right? Now, a lot of people knew him from a pro basketball career. You would think that maybe he would be, a little bit reserved and not so accessible. But everybody that I've spoken with here, including you, has said just the opposite.
Yeah, no, I only found out recently that he was a pro basketball player. I've known him in his years at the State House because I'm there testifying a lot of times. So just seeing him in action, I wouldn't be anywhere else tonight. Yeah, and I am so excited to celebrate his win tonight because he's going to work for the people of South Carolina. And that's who we need. We don't need somebody who can, I've heard these lines about, no, other candidates, they can bring in the money or they can bring in this or that. We need to stop that. We need to focus on real people, real needs, and fun as well. He's a really fun person. I've seen him in so many different spaces, right? Like, why can't we be joyful and laughing? And he does that. Look, I've seen Jermaine Johnson when the Buddhist monks came through. I've seen him at Outfest. I have seen him in so many different spaces. Like, he truly loves people, and he wants to connect with people. And we're missing that. We are missing that spirit, that true, soulfulness of human connection.
Ed, yeah, thank you so much for doing this for us. He'll be here any minute, and we will be bringing more coverage to you as soon as we do see him. But I think that she touched the nail on the head when you talk about some of the different issues on his platform. He's very big on education. He's been very big on mental health. He's talked out a lot about roads and a lot of the infrastructure here in South Carolina. Everybody here is so excited to see what he's going to do next when it comes time to taking action and not just talking. I'm going to send it back to you, Gavin, as the party continues and we wait for him to arrive.
And we know he's going to be arriving and giving his victory speech because he was just declared the Democratic gubernatorial nominee by the Associated Press at 8:45. So it's a huge, huge victory right there for Jermaine Johnson, state representative there. And of course, because like we've been saying, Johnson raised only about $450,000 this cycle, was even pressured to drop out of this race earlier in the year, stayed in the race, bested Billy Webster, who spent about $2 million in this race. There you see him right there. He's coming in. He's got a big smile on his face. He's pumped because, like we're saying, he defied the odds here. We saw Billy Webster up on TV all the time. We didn't see Jermaine anywhere. But again, what Johnson had going for him into this was his ability to be having some viral hot takes there too, especially when you saw him on the House floor over the years that he's been in the State House since 2020. He has had some pretty big moments when it comes to talking about against DEI, these pushes by Republicans to outlaw diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Also some very passionate speeches when it comes to critical race theory. It looks like he's about to give his speech too. We'll definitely take it live when he gets to the microphone for sure. But it's just been fascinating to watch his evolution on this campaign trail. We sat down with him on This Week in South Carolina, as well as all the other main candidates. And we're gonna jump to Jermaine right now. He's gonna give a victory speech right there in Hopkins.
Yeah! That's what I'm talking about.
We're at Jermaine Johnson's watch party in Hopkins. He's hugging his wife right now before he addresses his supporters at the church in Hopkins after just being declared the Democratic gubernatorial nominee by the Associated Press at 8:45. So huge news there in that three-person race for him to win it outright. And we're about to hear him speak right now to his supporters. And just so you guys know, we're waiting for Jermaine to speak there at the podium. Unlike in the the 5-person race in the Republican Party, but here we go with the Democrats and Jermaine. He's taking it all in. It's a big moment to be declared the winner an hour and 45 minutes after that race, after the polls closed, and a lot of momentum here. And we're still waiting for Jermaine to address this crowd. They're pretty amped up, as you can imagine. He's really taking it in. I think getting a little emotional there.
Oh my God. First of all, I need to give an honor to my Lord and Savior. Oh, I am honored to be your Democratic nominee for governor of South Carolina, y'all. Oh. When I tell you, I am at a loss for words this evening. Oh, my goodness. I need to thank some people first. First, like I said, I need to thank my beautiful wife. Y'all's next first lady, y'all. I want to thank my children for being here. My children down front here. I need to thank all of my family members that are here right now. My sister flew in from Minnesota. My niece flew in to be a part of this here. All of my in-laws who've adopted me to make me a cousin, a nephew, a brother, my family members, all of my friends, my supporters. Y'all, I cannot even express to you how thankful I am for having all of you standing with me through all of this. It has been a grueling year and some change. Oh my God. This is a moment right now that is going to go down in history. We made history. History's been made. And I want to thank my pastor who's in here, Pastor Sammy Wade, who's over here. There's a reason why I chose this facility this evening. Because back in 2015, I held my very first, after I retired from basketball, I held my very first event when I created my nonprofit organization. And I remember trying to get people together so I can teach them about second opportunities and things. And I held my first event in that room right there. And it was raining really bad that day. And I remember I catered a bunch of food and only about 3 people showed up. And I remember that moment. And then the next year after that, I was in that room over there, and that's where I advocated for a young man who had been stopped 3 times in 3 days by the police. And y'all have heard me tell this story before, and it happened in that room right there, and that's when I met State Representative Joe Neal. And that's the individual who taught me about politics. He's the one who taught me about what it meant to be a servant leader, how to show up for people in your communities. And I will never forget that moment. I will never forget what that meant for me and what it did for my life to go forward. And now, after defeating a 22-year incumbent to become the first African-American and the youngest to represent that district, we have continued on to make more history, to do amazing things for the people of South Carolina. And I want y'all to know that this victory here this evening does not belong to me alone. It belongs to everybody in this room. Everybody standing behind me right here. I thank you. I thank you for standing with me when it was not popular to do so. I thank you for standing with me when they said I wasn't electable. They said I wasn't electable. I thank you for standing with me when they said you need to be a multimillionaire or a billionaire to win this. But what we showed tonight is that when the people speak, they cannot be ignored because it's people powered. And now we truly will continue this mission. We have the opportunity to go on and to build this new South Carolina that we've been talking about. We are going to celebrate tonight. We are going to, because this is a monumental moment for every last one of us. So I'm telling you right now, celebrate, enjoy it, because you all are a part of history. Forever, in my heart, a part of history. But tomorrow, we're going to get back to work. We're going to hit the ground running, and we're going to do what we have to do. And I want to take this moment to thank the other two candidates that were in this race, because it was not easy. It was not easy when you have signs all over the state. They have commercials on every channel. They've got ads everywhere. It only makes somebody like myself have to work that much harder. I had to have boots on the ground. And you see I got my boots on. Boots on the ground. We showed the people of South Carolina that grassroots organizing is alive and well. It's alive and well. Talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors, your family members. That's how we change things in this state. That's how we motivate people. Going to the places in the state where no candidate has ever been before. Talking to people, meeting them where they are. That's how we change things. Giving people a voice, letting them be heard, allowing them to feel seen. That is what we do as Democrats. That is what we do as leaders. We are to touch the people. We are to meet the moment. That is how we are going to change things. So on tomorrow, this is what we do. We're going to get on our phones and we're going to say the job's not done. The job's not done until everybody in this state has an opportunity for a new South Carolina. Everybody. So again, I want to give my beautiful First Lady an opportunity to say a few words right here, y'all. This is my First Lady. Go ahead, baby.
I just want to thank everybody for being here, for believing in us. Thank you. One thing that I can say that I know for sure.
All right, we were just hearing from
about my husband.
Yeah, we were just hearing from. I can say that audio. Thank you, Jermaine Johnson, State Representative Jermaine Johnson, who was just declared the Democratic gubernatorial nominee in that race, winning it outright, saying there, they said I wasn't electable. Well, we showed them what we can do tonight, talking about the people power there too. And he bested two other Democrats in that race who spent more than $2 million each, most of their own money there too. And Johnson there raised $450,000 for that race, and he has about $80,000 on hand there. So quite a moment there for Jermaine Johnson to just win this race straight up. No TV advertising, really just like I said, boots on the ground, getting people out there and really talk about that new South Carolina, being the face of the new South Carolina. Interesting to see this play out because he really did buck a lot of party insiders there too. So it's going to be interesting to see some reconciliation here going forward among party insiders and Jermaine, now that he is the nominee for Democrat for the governor there. So that's going to be fascinating to see, especially as we wait to see who he's going to be facing off against in November. As you can see, if you're watching us on TV, that we have, again, these numbers for the five Republicans now in the race, because we saw Josh Kimbrell drop out. And actually, we just saw Nancy Mace concede earlier moments ago, too. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the numbers we have right now is Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette at 29%, Attorney General Alan Wilson at 26%, 5th District Congressman Ralph Norman at 17%, Low Country businessman Ron Reddy at 16%, and then you saw Nancy Mace there at 11%, too. So she's throwing her support behind Alan Wilson. We saw a tweet from the Post and Courier's Caitlin Bird talking about this, saying that she conceded about 15 minutes ago this Republican race for governor and immediately endorsed Wilson, saying the two had buried the hatchet, which is super fascinating if you watched any of that social media play out last year, where you'd see repeatedly from Congresswoman Mace laying in on Attorney General Alan Wilson, calling him at times a pedophile protector. Well, she is supporting him right now as he puts in his bid and goes head-to-head with Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette here as the likely two to advance to a runoff. But that's not the case in the Democrats, because we just saw Jermaine Johnson, State Representative Johnson, clinching that nomination, which is just fascinating to see. We love election nights around here. It's super fun. You never know what you're going to get. Like we said, we're expecting a runoff there in the Republicans race. But I think for Johnson, too, what's been interesting, too, besides his career in the State House since 2020 as state rep there, he has a very powerful story talking about his time being homeless as a child, being saved by one of his basketball coaches, being sent to upstate to play basketball in high school, which then got him down to the College of Charleston on a scholarship and then out to the European continent for basketball over there. Really changed the trajectory of his life, especially when he saw family members killed by gun violence and also, again, being raised homeless at times, too. So a pretty big story right there. I think that resonated with a lot of people. And, of course, our debate here on ETV's studios, I think a lot of folks had a chance to see and hear from those three Democrats in a way that they haven't been able to unless they've been going to a lot of these forums across the state. So big news there for the Democrats with Jermaine Johnson as the nominee. So we got Lindsey Graham is being declared the winner. Look at that, folks. Look at that. Look at that. We got some news there, Scott. And everyone was saying that he was going to get dragged into a runoff, something that has never happened since Senator Lindsey Graham announced that he was going to run to succeed Strom Thurmond back in 2002. What were you doing in 2002, Scott?
I was watching Lindsey Graham run for Senate. And you got to remember, Lindsey Graham made his bones in the impeachment trial against Bill Clinton. So he was an up-and-comer. He was, very, very aggressive in putting forth his bona fides. But again, he has always known which way the winds are blowing. He was one of the most truly vicious in some of the things he said, critics of Donald Trump, until Donald Trump took the reins of the Republican Party. And Trump has had few friends that praise him as much as Lindsey Graham has in the last couple of years. So Lindsey Graham is constantly threatened from the side. There's a constant murmur of people within the party saying, he's vulnerable this time, we can take him out. He's got money from AIPAC. He's got tons of a war chest. He's got Donald Trump's support. He has shown time and time again that he is resilient and resistant to these threats that seem to dissipate when push comes to shove and the ballots are cast.
Yeah, and to that effect, Scott, we're again talking about Graham being declared the Republican nominee as he seeks his 5th Senate term there. And we know that he'll be facing off against Dr. Annie Andrews, because she was also declared the Democratic nominee in that three-way race for the U.S. Senate there, too. So it's going to be Annie Andrews versus Lindsey Graham, as we pretty much expected going in on November. But again, Graham facing off in that 6-way primary, nothing new for him there, especially since he's, faced these big races, these big fields in the past there, too. So Mark Lynch there at 27%. Graham right now at 58%, but of course the AP calling that race for Graham. Is there a pathway, Scott, when we talk about Dr. Andrews going forward? I mean, we look back to 2020 with Jamie Harrison, former SCDP chairman, who then went on to be the DNC chair, raising $130 million to Graham's $100 million, and still a 10-point loss there for Jamie Harrison. 2020 presidential election year, different story than a midterm, but how do you see that path going forward for these two?
Yeah, now that's the first thing to note right there is the midterm is very different from a presidential year. So in addition to that, this is a midterm where Democrats are very, very agitated. They are very likely to turn out. But as you just pointed out, South Carolina is an R+10 state. So even if you get an excited and a Democratic Party who is passionate, they have 10 points to make up just to run even. So is there a path? Of course there's a path, but it's very, very narrow. It's very difficult terrain. Based on her expertise, she is probably going to go after a lot of Trump's agenda that Lindsey Graham is supporting, especially some of the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, things that RFK Jr. has been pushing. And she'll paint Lindsey Graham as complicit in these things, do things like point out how South Carolina had this massive measles outbreak, and it'll be painted as because Lindsey Graham didn't do X, Y, and Z. So does she have a path? She certainly has things that independents and Democrats are pretty angry about, but they have to show up in massive numbers. Independents are notoriously difficult to get out to the polls. Most independents are actually leaners, lean towards one party or the other. And in South Carolina, that's the Republican Party more than the Democratic Party. So you got 10% of people who are pure independents. They're the least likely to turn out. You've got to turn them out and excite them and fire up your own base and make sure there's no equal excitement on the other side. That's a tall order. Absolutely impossible? No, but yeah, use whatever metaphor you want. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
But she's going to make one heck of a fight out of it because she has a lot of ammunition and she has the expertise to deploy it.
Yeah, and that's and she's getting that national attention too there, Scott. But before we keep with the U.S. Senate race, I just want to update our listeners and viewers that we have heard from the Associated Press that Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evan and Attorney General Alan Wilson, as expected, are headed to a runoff now. They have bested the rest of the field there with Congressman Ralph Norman, businessman Rom Reddy, and Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Again, like we already said, that Nancy Mace has conceded and thrown her support behind Alan Wilson. She's rounding out the top five there at 11%. And again, this is 3% difference right here. Scott, take me to this race when we're talking about the Republican gubernatorial primary. Not too unexpected, but, I thought there was possibly some possibility for us to see that second lane come into this, because because Wilson and Evan are pretty much in a similar lane here too. We saw a lot of folks going after them. Do you think this would have been a different story if we didn't see someone like Rom Reddy or Nancy Mace get in this race and maybe put their firepower behind someone like Ralph Norman?
I was trying to think of who a Rom Reddy supporter would have gotten behind if there were no Rom Reddy. Now, first off, we have to actually assume that a Rom Reddy supporter would have voted in the first place. He is the type of candidate who brings people out who are sick of politics as usual. So if he weren't there, they might not have shown up. But let's assume they would have showed up. Who did he pull votes from? And Pamela Evan and Alan Wilson, were taking the lane of the experienced traditional candidate who's also a super Trump lover. Ralph Norman, he's a congressman, but he's a bit on the outside in that he has opposed Trump a few times. He's shown an independent streak. He backed Nikki Haley. His poll numbers seemed to put him a little higher than the numbers he appears to be finishing up at. We'll have to look at the end of the night. I've got to tell you, I expected him to be higher than Rom Reddy. I expected him to be pushing towards that second place, maybe making it into the runoff. The odds were against him, but the polls put it within the realm of possibility. So I'm really interested into where the voters peeled off. And also the obvious question, where did the undecideds jump to?
We need to find those undecided voters. I know you always find them in your polls, but Scott, to that effect, let's talk about Norman, because I did go to some of Rom Reddy's events. I was there when he launched in Greenville. I was recently there last Tuesday in Spartanburg at the Beacon Drive-In. And I did talk to a couple of people. I said, you know, where were you before Ron Reddy jumped in this race on March 16th? And they were actually, a lot of them were with Ralph Norman, but they liked hearing from Reddy and his outside views, kind of giving you that a bit of that Donald Trump-esque from 2016 when he was self-funding his own campaign. He wasn't taking money, like he wasn't doing all those things. He was a businessman outsider. That's what people liked about Ron Reddy. He really does appeal to a lot of those party activists too, which I guess we were trying to go ahead and see what was going to happen there with that when he also picked up, when we talked about Ralph Norman picking up Adam Morgan, former House Freedom Caucus chairman, to shore up his right flank there too. That was only about a week and a half ago. Some would say it was probably too late. There was discussion of possibly him picking up Nancy Mace as a running mate at some point too, but he went with Adam Morgan. I wonder if that was maybe too late, even though Adam Morgan's very active on social media and probably was deployed in a sense to help shore up some folks there too. But again, I think they really split that vote there. And you know, you even heard Norman making some sort of accusation against Reddy, saying that he was in cahoots with Alan Wilson to split this from the beginning. Is that just the kind of stuff that we expect to hear in these situations?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, that's not to say that anybody's telling a fib. Ralph Norman almost certainly believes that. Ralph Norman and Ron Reddy both came from, hey, I'm a successful businessman. The difference was Ron Reddy had not been inside politics already. So he got to say, I have succeeded in the same way Ralph Norman has, but I haven't been in politics like usual. And, you know, Ralph Norman picking someone from the South Carolina Freedom Caucus as a running mate, that's a little late. You know, that's not going to change a lot of votes at this point. And even if it did, it's only going to change some votes at the margins. It's only going to add a percentage or two. And that percentage or two, let's give him 4. He's still not in the top 2, which is where he needed to be. So, you know, even if the lieutenant governor appointment had made a bigger difference than it did, that alone would not have propelled him to making it to the runoff. So, you know, something has been happening with the polls where we've seen Ralph Norman doing well, but clearly when those undecideds jumped in, they were not jumping in behind Ralph Norman in the same way they were behind some of the other front runners.
Interesting storyline that we're watching here too in those two different lanes in this race. We're going to jump over to Alan Wilson's watch party, Attorney General Alan Wilson's watch party, where his running mate, Senator Mike Rickenbach, Republican from Florence, is now speaking to the crowd. Rickenbach's been with the Wilson ticket since January, and he is talking to them right now. Let's go there.
To be here. I want to thank you for this opportunity. This has been a long road, being in the state Senate, running with Alan, but he is tirelessly working. Therese and I, Alan and Jennifer, the whole team believes in you, believes in South Carolina. We want you to be a part of this team, and it is such a pleasure. Right now, I'm going to introduce the man of the hour, the next governor of South Carolina, Alan Wilson. Saying thank you to Mike Rickenbach. I could not have chosen a better running mate to be my partner in this journey. Mike, thank you. I want to tell all of you something. When I was thinking about who I was going to pick to be my running mate this past fall, I wanted someone who would be an inspirational leader, someone who was aspirational, someone who would inspire people and bring people together, someone who would push me beyond my limits to help me be the best candidate and the best governor I could be. And I found that person, and I decided to make her husband my running mate. That's Therese Rickenbach, y'all. I'm kidding. Mike, every single day that I have been on this campaign trail with you, we have talked every night. You've been my first call in the morning, my last call at night. You have ratified and reaffirmed that I have great judgment. Thank you, brother. I love you, and you're going to be an amazing lieutenant governor. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to start off by thanking my wife, Jennifer. If it wasn't for her support, I could not do this. And my children, Michael and Anna Grace, they're really the reason. They are what drives me. I love you kids. I'm so proud of you. The campaign team that we assembled, our staff, if I start naming people, I'm going to leave someone out, but I'm looking around and I'm seeing you. I want to thank you all. Thank you all for what you've done. I'm looking over here and I'm seeing my mother Roxanne. I'm seeing my brothers. I see cousins standing here, extended family. Guys, I feel so small right now with so many of you just looking at me. My friends, my family, my supporters, the campaign team that's been out there knocking on thousands of doors, making tens of thousands of phone calls, sending out letters, postcards, calling people, my social media warriors, my quick reaction force, my veterans who are out there fighting for me. Thank you. Because I did not win this. I did not get a slot and win a slot to the runoff. We did. It was you that got us there. I want to thank those who invested, not just their time, their energy, and their talents, but their money. These things are expensive. And the financial supporters out there, I'll be calling you first thing in the morning. But you made it possible. You put the gas in the car for us to take our mission, our vision for the state of South Carolina. That change is coming. The status quo will happen no more. And I want to thank you who supported me financially by allowing us to get this message out to the people of South Carolina. I also want to thank God. Many of you have heard my faith journey. And it's by God's providence that I am here tonight. Earlier today, I got up this morning and I prayed to God because I didn't know what the results would be today. I believed them. I believed we would be here tonight. But I prayed to God not to win this race, but to give me the grace to accept whatever his will was. And if his will was for me not to be here tonight going into this next phase, this next chapter, then I needed the grace to accept that. And if it was his will for me to wake up in the morning and begin the next 2-week campaign, to give me the courage and the fortitude to rise to the task he's laid before me. And I give all the glory to God and my Savior Jesus Christ. Thank you so much. I want to thank the voters, the supporters out there, because this is a job interview. The office of governor does not belong to anybody. It does not belong to Alan Wilson. It does not belong to its current occupant. It belongs to you, the people of South Carolina. I've been traveling the state asking you to hire me to do this job. This is not something you get coronated for. This is not something you can inherit. Not everybody believes that. You have to fight for it. You have to earn the votes. And to those of you out there who voted for me, thank you. I appreciate you. You put us in this position to win this race in 2 weeks. I want to thank another group of people. There's some people who offered their names up. They were my competitors. They were opponents. They were not my enemies. Sometimes it may have felt that way on social media, on debate stages when we were getting chippy with each other. But the reality is, the other people who ran for this race, ran for this job, they love this state too. They offered themselves because they thought they were the best alternative to be able to lead it forward. Some of them are not moving to the next level. I want to start by thanking Josh Kimbrell, a guy who was able to articulate a message, and he's done a great job of doing that, a leader in the Senate who endorsed me last week. Josh, I appreciate your endorsement. I want to thank Nancy Mace. I learned tonight, she called me tonight and she announced that she was going to endorse me, and I want to thank Nancy for that. Nancy and I had a long conversation over the last couple of weeks, and while things got really tough there in the early days, we came to an understanding. We buried our hatchet, we got past our differences, which is what you have to do as a leader in government. When you have a difference with somebody, and you feel people hating you, you hating them, you have to rise above it for the greater good to serve the people. And Nancy Mace and I were able to do that. So Nancy, I want to thank you for reaching out to me tonight. I want to thank you for your endorsement. I want to thank Ralph Norman, I want to thank Ron Reddy, because they each, like Nancy, brought unique aspects to this race. They brought a unique way of campaigning. It was different than mine, okay? But it was unique to them, and they actually made me a better candidate. They made me appreciate this process so much more because it made me fight harder and work harder and appreciate it more. So thank you to them. Now, they're not moving forward in this race, but this is what I want to say to their supporters. To the supporters, the people out there who voted today for Nancy Mace, Ralph Norman, and Ron Reddy, 3 people who represented something to you, that inspired and sparked something in you. To the people who supported Nancy Mace because she was the maverick who shook things up. You never knew what she was going to do or say, and you love that about her. There's a home for you in the Wilson campaign. To the Ralph Norman supporters out there who loved that Ralph Norman was a conservative juggernaut who challenged the establishment and the status quo. There is a home for you here. To those of you who supported Ron Reddy, the successful businessman, the plain-spoken outsider who brought a message of reform and something different, there is a home for you here in the Wilson campaign. I will fight for you. And I invite all of you who I wasn't your second choice coming into tonight, or I wasn't your first choice. I'm willing to be your second choice tomorrow morning. Give us the chance to fight for you, to fight for the ideals that you found so valuable in those other candidates. Let me be that standard bearer for you. I will carry that for you in the next 2 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, as your next governor, Mike and I have talked about this. Our number one goal in everything that we do, our North Star, our true north, if you will be to make living in South Carolina more affordable for your families, to make our economy more profitable for your businesses, and to make our government more accountable to you. That is what I commit to you. I'm a 30-year combat veteran and a career prosecutor. I have fought in the courtrooms of this country for our constitutional rights and to put violent criminals behind prison, and I have fought on the battlefields of Iraq to defend and protect our Constitution and our way of life. I will bring that same courage, that same conviction, that same passion, that same desire to fight for you to the office of the governor if you will give me the chance. Hire me to be your next governor. I will be a fighter for you. We will fight to eliminate the income tax, reduce your property taxes, DOGE, fraud, waste, and abuse from government, promote a kids-first education agenda, fix our crumbling roads and bridges, lower utility rates by bringing more energy into South Carolina, and having smart growth that respects the character of the communities that we live in. No more boondoggle deals that are cramming things down your throat. We're going to have a thoughtful government. We're not going to have the status quo anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, to those of you watching at home tonight, I am asking for your vote in 2 weeks. 2 weeks is a very short turnaround. We will win this race. There is energy, there is momentum, and we are going to bring the heat. But I need you. I need you. Can I hear you? I need you. This is the job interview. I'm asking you to hire me to be your next governor. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I need you to get to work. We got to get home, get a good night's sleep, because it's going to be a long 2 weeks. But 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to be celebrating a victory and a pathway to the next governor of South Carolina. That is me, Alan Wilson. I will fight for you. Thank you. God bless you. Let's get to work.
All right, that was 4-term Attorney General Alan Wilson there, who was advanced to the runoff for the Republican gubernatorial nomination with Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. Scott, we just heard there from the Attorney General as well as his running mate, Senator Mike Rickenbach of Florence, talking about this and getting the commitments from 1st District Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who came in 5th place in this race out of the 6 that were on the ballot, throwing her support behind him, even after all the things he said. And he said that there's actually a home for you on the campaign, which is interesting. Maybe deploying her on social media, since she has been really avid on that, especially when she attacked him vociferously last year. I think I used that word correctly there too, over and over, about how he didn't convict people, didn't prosecute hard enough, and the like there. So interesting to see that. But he also said you never know what she's going to say, which was interesting because I was up in Greer on last night, and we heard from the governor who endorsed Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, and he said that he likes Pam Evette because she doesn't say crazy stuff. So it's interesting to see these two dynamics emerging here with these candidates, as well as these tickets coalescing. So The next 2 weeks, like we just heard the Attorney General say, are going to be very intense. What can we start gearing up for at this point? What's it going to look like right now? Trench warfare?
Well, of course, but let's think about your proposal that Nancy Mace kind of take over and be the social media vector for this. Pam Evitt has ready-made ammunition to pull up previous social media posts about Alan Wilson and juxtapose it with any positive thing she might say about Alan Wilson. We'll see Nancy Mace's previous social media in anything that she does to endorse Alan Wilson. So he's going to have to be very strategic, practically surgical in how he deploys her. And remember, she's getting the low double digits in votes. He can get name recognition and attention when she comes to an event, but compared to the rest of the field, she doesn't have a lot of voters to deliver. She can try and make a convincing argument as to why, other voters should not go to Evitt, but go to Wilson. But, the best thing she can do is get eyes on Wilson, but she has to be careful because there's so much ammunition out there about things she's said before. And, I think grenades underestimate a description of some of the things she's tossed at him.
God, I'm terrified for the next 2 weeks, the way you just described that, Scott. But when we talk about what's going on there, too, the Trump endorsement is going to be critical at this point, coming in handy right now. Obviously, with the self-inflicted wound there by mentioning Henry D. McMaster Jr. as the potential running mate, that's gone and buried right now. He's discredited that. We don't expect Evitt to announce a running mate in the next 2 weeks. She's told me that they want to focus on just winning this on their own, which, of course, when you don't have a surrogate like a Mike Rickenbach to deploy, kind of hurts you a little bit, but she has plenty of other people backed up there. So I'm wondering, at this point, when you're trying to get those ready voters, when you're trying to get those Norman voters, is this when the president's endorsement is critical? We might start seeing some appearances by him or possibly some more ads by him directly focused on getting those voters, more so than what we've already seen on social media from his Truth Social posts?
Yeah, she needs more than just a Truth Social post endorsement. She needs something, much more tangible, much more direct, and much more of a personal statement about something she's said, done, supported, other than, hey, she's awesome, please vote for her. There is, however, a danger in if we continue to have such trouble with Iran. We have a ceasefire, we don't have a ceasefire, we have a deal, we don't have a deal. We're unfreezing billions of dollars of their money. Well, you know what? A lot of South Carolina Republicans are America First Republicans. Yeah, that overlaps overwhelmingly with MAGA Republicans, but that could blunt the effectiveness of a Trump endorsement. So she's going to have to get Trump to do more than just post a couple of Truth Social, praises for her.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see play out, too, of course, because there's so much going on up in Washington. There's the 250th anniversary of the founding of the country, so that's a factor in play. Iran, like you're talking about, especially when we just saw that military helicopter shot down the Strait of Hormuz, allegedly by Iran. A lot to see play out there, too. And again, I'm trying to figure out, again, these voters from Ready and Norman, because I was talking to a couple. I was up in Anderson and Greer in the upstate. Again, critical area that you want to win when it comes to winning these primaries with those vote-rich areas. And a lot of folks were also, when I was asking them, like, what did you think of Trump's endorsement? One woman said it broke her heart that he went with someone like Evitt. Other people have said that he doesn't know what's going on the ground here, that it's different. There's a lot of concerns over corruption and those themes that we've seen play out on those other campaigns that are now essentially moot, even though, of course, we hear from Evan and Wilson also talking about cleaning up Columbia, too, especially when it comes to audits and reforms and cutting regulations. But again, there's not much policy daylight between the two of them. The biggest difference we saw when we came to these candidates, especially, was on abortion, I feel like, with Congressman Norman talking about supporting personhood abortion rights, restricting that to personhood to inception versus the 6-week law that's on the books right now, which, again, no one else is really pushing beyond because they know the polling doesn't support that. So it's going to be really coming down to, we're talking about personalities here, it sounds like.
Yeah, and excuse me. Please note that the polling is against the 6-week ban and against personhood for the general population of South Carolina, but it's overwhelmingly for it among the people who are going to show up to this primary runoff. So you tailor your message to your constituency, and the only constituency that matters are the people who are going to show up to this primary, not the average person in South Carolina. And there's a whole other show to be done about that. But you made a point earlier that I thought was really good. People saying, hey, Trump doesn't know what's going on in the ground in South Carolina. And that hits to the heart of the nature of Trump's endorsement and how he needs to step it up from sort of the boilerplate endorsement from a distance. If it's going to make a difference, it's going to have to seem like he understands South Carolina, or at least knows more about it, and that he says Evett is right for South Carolina because of blank, and that blank has to be filled in by a reason that South Carolina conservatives can directly connect to.
Yeah, and that's something that, when you're talking about that, we bring back memories of 2018 when Governor Henry McMaster was faced into a runoff there with upstate businessman John Warren. We saw Trump come in and swoop in and help push him over in that runoff race there too. So it seems like we're going to be kind of doing something similar to, again, like we saw, that was a 5-person Republican primary in 2018. And we saw McMaster he kind of was the top vote getter in that runoff, but again was with John Warren, who he beat by 8 points 2 weeks later. So that's how close that race was with someone like Henry McMaster, who's an institution when it comes to Republican politics. Guessing we're going to see McMaster step it up too. He's been on the campaign trail as well. He does draw a crowd. It's interesting at these events because you have one photo line for Pam Evett and you have one photo line for McMaster. It's almost like a going away tour for McMaster, the longest serving governor in our state, the 117th governor in our state, because he gets to, try and carry that torch. Do you think it's also a matter, Scott, of them trying to convince voters that, hey, this is someone that is going to continue on what we've seen for the past 10 years, someone that's going to continue this growth, even though there's concerns about growth, someone that's going to continue this legacy, this work with the legislature. Again, something that we hear from Alan Wilson also talking about doing and being supportive of. But when you have someone like Evett who says, I can just go into this job on day one and pick up where I've already been, that's going to be something that I guess needs to be conveyed thoroughly to the voters.
Yeah, claiming credit for the nature of South Carolina's growth is gold in the Republican primary, mainly because South Carolina is having a K-shaped economy right now. Most people, the average South Carolinian, is having a very difficult time economically. Those who are in the upper percentage of income are actually doing well and improving. But those who are in the middle and down are actually going down faster. There are certain sectors of the economy overall that are helping. The people who are investing, the people who own the manufacturing, they're doing great. And they show up in the Republican primaries. The people who work the manufacturing jobs, manufacturing output's up, manufacturing jobs are down. So that K-shaped economy means the economy is working phenomenal for some people, and those are the people who are going to show up at the Republican runoff. And so being able to tap into at least a nominal claim for the type of growth that South Carolina has had, that's going to help a candidate. And if Henry McMaster can help shift some of the credit for that to Pamela Evett, then that's going to be something that's going to be hard to counter without Alan Wilson saying, no, the economy is not as great as you think it is. And that's just not a winning message in a Republican primary runoff. Again, not talking about a general election. So you think of your audience, you think of the message, and if McMaster can help give her credit for the type of growth we've had, that gives her an edge that Wilson's going to have to erode one way or another.
All right, yeah, it's going to, again, be a very busy 2 weeks. And of course, We expect to see them in a full-out sprint. They can start fundraising again specifically for this runoff, and we expect to probably see some big announcements in the coming hours where they say, I've raised $1 million in the first 24 hours, or had commitments for that, like we saw Evitt do at the beginning of her campaign as well. Like we heard Attorney General Alan Wilson say he's going to hit the phones and start fundraising again immediately as well, because again, these guys have already raised money. Evitt raised about $3.5 million for this race and took out a $1 million loan and has $500,000 on hand as of 2 weeks ago. Going to look up Wilson's numbers really quick, but again, takes a lot of money to get folks out to vote again, not just for the primary, but for the runoff primary. You see a drop off there too. But let's look at some more numbers here, and of course, we're going to look back at the Democratic gubernatorial candidates. We know that State Representative Jermaine Johnson is now the Democratic gubernatorial nominee, winning straight up 59% out of the three-person race here, and more than enough to send him to the ballot in November to face off whoever's going to face off against when it comes to this runoff between Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evitt and Attorney General Alan Wilson right there. As you see, neck and neck at 29% for Evitt and 26% for Wilson, and Congressman Ralph Norman there at 17%, followed by Rom Reddy at 15%. So interesting how the night has been shaking out. The Attorney General's race, gosh, I feel like we haven't talked about them in a hot minute. There's been so much news going on. We got about 20 minutes left on air, but we do see that Georgetown Senator Stephen Goldfinch, they're holding at 42%, followed by 8th Circuit Solicitor David Stumbo at 34%, and 1st Circuit Solicitor David Pasco at 24%. Looks like Goldfinch and Stumbo will be heading to a runoff. That's not official yet. Obviously, he has not made that 50% threshold plus one vote to prevent that, like some other folks. And then we're also in a neck-and-neck race here for the Commissioner of Agriculture with Cody Simpson at 38% and Danny Ford at 37%. A lot of folks were trying to see if Cody Simpson there, who's formerly worked for the governor and also was over the USDA here for the Farm Service Agency, appointed by President Donald Trump. He was actually endorsed by President Donald Trump in this race, told him to get in this race, run, Cody, run, and he's running right now. He's running into a runoff, it looks like, with Danny Ford. So interesting race right there. Again, one of those statewide constitutional offices that's open, wide open, because Hugh Weathers, the former Commissioner of Agriculture, current Commissioner of Agriculture, is retiring after 20 years. And then, of course, Senator Lindsey.
And let's take a look again back at that Attorney General race, the Republican Attorney General race. There is such a strong demographic component to where the votes are coming in from. It's close when you look at all the votes all over, but there is some demographic concentration in where it's coming from. And you see Stumbo getting it from the kind of northwest corner of the state very, very strongly, and then Goldfinch is more diffused throughout a lot of the other state. So the geographic factor for the turnout could be something really relevant. It's a lot easier to focus your attention in a small area and get them out to the polls, as opposed to if you've won by a smaller amount but along a broader area. That's a different campaign. So that's something to look at as this, as we assume, moves to a runoff.
Mm-hmm. Scott, I also want to pick up with another statewide constitutional officer, the Ag Commissioner race too, because again, like we were saying, Cody Simpson was endorsed by President Donald Trump. He was also working for McMaster as his chief executive assistant and agriculture advisor from 2018 to 2025. And now it looks like he's heading to a runoff with Danny Ford there, because neither of them have 50% plus one of the vote. They're both between 37 and 38% right there. So I'm wondering, when we keep talking about this runoff for the governor's race and trying to get Trump to engage more when it comes to Pam Evitt, who he also endorsed, does that mean he's going to have to double down harder too and give some more love to Cody Simpson to get those folks out there to best Danny Ford at this point too? It's going to be a head-to-head right there.
I think a lot of people are going to take note, whether they talk about it or not, that the Donald Trump endorsement did not propel a lot of people to an undisputed victory. It pushed them to a runoff. And so that's going to make people wonder, okay, was his endorsement diluted by giving it to so many different people? Was it not as strong as it was in other states? Will he have to go, I support this candidate for this race, that candidate for that race all over again? And will that make it seem like he's diluting his endorsement? So the way this will play out, given the fact that a lot of the candidates he endorsed did not have an outright win. That's going to change the dynamic. You still do better with Trump in your corner, but how much more of the vote that gets you has been different here in this primary in South Carolina than we've seen, for example, in Texas, where it just flat out turned the U.S. Senate race and a few other races around the country. We've also seen Trump's endorsement weaken in a few cases here and there. And so needing his endorsement spread out and it not being the deciding factor to go to an undisputed victory means we're going to have some interesting things to follow, and we'll see how much time Trump is able to make in order to do personalized endorsements, because a Truth Social post isn't going to cut it and isn't going to bring enough votes for an undisputed win in the runoff.
Yeah, and Scott, when we talk about this, I think a lot of folks were asking us from the national perspective too. When you look at what happened in Iowa when Trump got in that race too, talking about Zach Lane, businessman who defeated Representative Randy Finstra in the Republican primary for governor there. That was the first time in the midterm elections that a Trump-backed candidate for governor, the House or Senate, lost a primary. It was very close. Lane was the 37.8. It was about a 1 point, less than 1 point difference. No one's saying that's happening yet, but that's what we're going to be watching for in those margins in the next 2 weeks here in South Carolina between Alan Wilson and Pam Evett, who's endorsed by Trump, as well as Cody Simpson and Danny Ford. Simpson being endorsed by Trump, going to a runoff as well. So that national perspective, that weakening, that softness you're talking about with that Trump endorsement could come heavily into play. And what would that say if he, lost 2 candidates in South Carolina in that endorsement? What does that say for other folks in these midterms? Does that indicate something going into the midterms that people should read into further?
Well, I think it'll make the super Trump endorsed candidates a little worried going into the midterms. When Trump endorsed candidates in Republican primaries in Republican states either didn't win or barely won, then these super Trump candidates who won strongly with a Trump endorsement have to face the general electorate. They're going to be thinking, wow, Trump's voice wasn't even as powerful in my own party as it got closer to the general election. How should I structure my campaign? I made my campaign all about my connection to Trump early on in the primary, but his influence has been weakening even among the party and is negative among
Scott,
Democrats and
we got to jump to Lieutenant
independents.
Governor Pam Evett. She's addressing her supporters in Greenville right now. Again, she's in that runoff with Attorney General Alan Wilson, and she's speaking to folks up in Greenville, surrounded by her family. And let's see if we can listen in here. The governor, Henry McMaster, is also joining her on stage. We can't hear that audio yet. There we go. And her mother's on stage with her, too.
I can't say how much I love you, how much you mean to me. I want to first thank my family. My husband David, my mom Jackie, Joseph, Jackson, and Simon. And one person I wish could be here tonight is my dad. But I know he's looking down from heaven and he is just so proud. And lastly, I want to thank 2 of the greatest conservative leaders our nation has ever known. One, my friend and my mentor, Governor Henry. And President Donald J. Trump. To all of you what he just said to me on the phone a moment ago. He says, we are going to fight and we are going to win this runoff. He said he is going to help us deliver the America First agenda right here in South Carolina. When we started this race almost a year ago, we were at 2% in our first poll. 2. We've come a long way, and tonight we punched a ticket to this runoff. South Carolina, you sent a message tonight. You spoke clearly and you said, we want a business leader, an entrepreneur, somebody who has created jobs, somebody just like Donald Trump, who's going to bring the private sector experience to government. In 2 weeks, we're going to win this runoff election, but that is just the beginning. We're going to eliminate income tax. It's your money. It belongs in your pockets, not in Columbia. We're going to slash property taxes because no South Carolinian should ever be taxed out of their home. We're going to pass full universal school choice to give South Carolina's next generation the best education possible. And we're going to fix our roads. We will stop funding woke institutions, and we will end tenure once and for all. Get rid of radical professors who are trying to indoctrinate our kids. And we are going to stand up for conservative voices and conservative values. I have never, I will never back down to the woke mob. Over these next 2 weeks, we're going to highlight a very clear contrast between myself and a career politician, If you want a finger in the wind career politician who won't take a stand and who does the political thing and not the right thing, then you should excitedly vote for Alan Wilson. If you want someone who more than doubled his taxpayer-funded salary while you struggle to make ends meet, then Alan Wilson might be the guy for you. And if you want someone who has bankrolled his radical liberal corporates that spew DEI, then Alan Wilson is your guy. But if you want a business leader, a CEO, and someone who has spent their career outside of politics, I'm asking for your vote. If you want a Trump-endorsed, steel-spine conservative, then join our team. And if you want to put a stake in the woke DEI mob that tries to cancel conservatives every chance they get, then I'm your candidate. This is a simple choice. A choice between a career politician with no business experience who lines their pockets with your tax dollars, or a Trump-endorsed businesswoman and conservative who's going to take the fight to the radical left for you, the people of South Carolina. In 2 weeks, we're going to start writing the next chapter in South Carolina's historic story. South Carolina, thank you. God bless you. Now let's go win this thing.
All right, that was Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett there up in Greenville. She's in that runoff now with Attorney General Alan Wilson, the two, not either of them getting that 50% plus one vote to advance straight up like we saw with the Democrat gubernatorial nominee, Jermaine Johnson, the state house representative from Hopkins here in the Midlands. And of course, she already heard her starting to attack Alan Wilson in her victory speech, or her advancement speech, I should say. And it's going to be interesting to see those ads rolling out too. Scott, I also want to note for our viewers that we will be seeing an SCGOP sponsored runoff debate next Tuesday at Coastal Carolina on June 16th. It's not ETV, we're not doing that one, but it's SCGOP and Gray Media again. So we know that both of those candidates will be there. They've committed. So we only saw Lieutenant Governor Evatt participate in one of the 4 debates. So what do you think is going to happen on that debate stage next Tuesday down in Coastal Carolina?
Well, first I'm going to plug my good friend and provost at Coastal Carolina, Gibbs.
There we go. Yes.
He knows this stuff backwards and forwards as well. And you should get some commentary about what's going to happen there.
Paging Gibbs.
But also you saw a very different tone coming from Evatt's speech than you saw Wilson's. Evatt is still hitting those culture warrior issues that she thinks are going to turn people out, turn out the hardcore Republicans. And that really is who shows up at, primary, especially primary runoffs. Wilson's strategy just from this speech seems to be, hey, I know you supported other people, but we have the same beliefs. Come behind me. Her strategy seems to be, I'm the only one who will hammer home these culture war issues that are destroying America, destroying South Carolina, and I'm the only one who can protect you. And that really is a page out of Donald Trump's playbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also interesting to hear her doubling down on that, again, saying that we will not back down to the woke mobs, talking about what she referred to, those student protesters there at South Carolina State University back in April when she was when it was well known that she was going to be speaking at that May 8th commencement at that historically black college university, South Carolina State University there in Orangeburg, was disinvited afterwards, citing security concerns by the university there, even though she said she was willing to talk. And of course, it was kind of surprising because the university knew her stance. They knew that she was a Trump person, that if there was any concerns about that, that was well understood going into this. So what do you make of that entire controversy of that usage of that language, woke mobs? There's a lot of connotations there, especially when we look at the history at SCSU. And even some Republicans derided her for using such language. But then we just heard her, again, throwing that red meat back out there.
Yeah, the woke mob, it's not really accurate. What you saw is South Carolina State trying to say, hey, we are wanting diversity of ideologies speaking here, but the people who were actually graduating, they exercised their voice and said, we don't want this commencement speaker. We should have a voice too, and that's what happened. However, it played beautifully into the political hands of somebody running for the Republican gubernatorial primary. College professors, of which I'm one, are a frequent point of attack. The running joke, but it's true, is we can't indoctrinate people who we can't even get to read the syllabus without a lot of pressure. But also, we, especially at Winthrop, we're proud of this. We fulfill the requirements of the REACH Act, which means we make sure no student graduates without reading and learning about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, 5 at least of the Federalist Papers, the Emancipation Proclamation, and some other document related to the civil rights struggle. That's the law of South Carolina, and we professors are the front line making sure you don't graduate from college without learning that. So the fact that you can pick certain targets who are going to be popular targets with your base, that's what we're seeing here. And that's the culture warrior stuff that really can fire up her potential voters. We're seeing 2 different strategies, the culture war versus the big tent. And as we move forward and as we see how Trump parachutes into this, and if he does, we can see 2 very different campaigns shaping up.
Got a lot to watch for over the next 2 weeks, Scott. That's Dr. Scott Huffman with Winthrop University. We're going to jump to Rochelle Dean, who's at Jermaine Johnson's watch party, of course, with Johnson being named the Democratic gubernatorial nominee outright tonight with more than 58% of the vote, besting 2 other opponents. Hey, Rochelle.
All right, Gavin, it has been an electrifying night here at St. John Baptist Church in Hopkins. I'm going to step out of the way for a second. You can see that Representative Jermaine Johnson, the new South Carolina Democratic nominee, is still here in the building. He has been taking pictures with all of the people who have been here supporting him from day one. Now, when he came out to give his victory speech, he was speechless. He said so, and then really got emotional, having a hard time really conjuring up the emotion of the moment. He told everybody thank you, even his challengers, noting that they had bigger campaigns, they had more money, they were able to put on more advertisements and commercials than he was able to, but he said it was the boots on the ground, getting out there and talking to people, making them feel seen and heard. That's what he plans to do on day one. I'm going to send it back to you guys there in the studio.
Great. Thanks, Rochelle. A lot of reporting going on there, too. Probably the biggest takeaway from the night, again, with Jermaine Johnson winning that outright with limited funds compared to his challengers. Now we're going to go to Victoria Hanson, who's at Attorney General Alan Wilson's watch party. As we've noted before, he's advanced to the runoff against Lieutenant Governor Pam Evitt. Hey, Vic.
Hi, Gavin. The party is winding down here at Alan Wilson's watch party behind me, but there's still a lot of excitement. Wilson just spoke moments ago for about 15 minutes, announcing that he has made it to the runoff in his party's nomination for governor. He thanked his supporters, he thanked voters, he thanked his opponents for the way they ran their races, and specifically he thanked Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who he says called him tonight and pledged his support. Again, he spoke for just about 15 minutes and then quickly wrapped up saying, you know what, there's a lot of work to do because that runoff election is just 2 weeks away. Back to you, Gavin.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of work to do. It's going to be a full-out sprint like we've been talking about. And of course, there's going to be another debate, a runoff debate on the 16th at Coastal Carolina University between Evitt and Wilson. Now we're going to Lieutenant Governor Pam Evitt's headquarters. Watch party up there with Reagan Knight, who's in Greenville. Hey, Reagan, how's it going there?
Hey, Gavin. Well, right now there is a lot of energy in the room right now. The Lieutenant Governor did speak. Governor McMaster was here as well with Lieutenant Governor. He did not speak, and as a matter of fact, he already left and hit the elevators as soon as she finished speaking. But the Lieutenant Governor did say that President Trump did call her momentarily just before she took the stage, and he did tell the Lieutenant Governor that they are going to win the runoff election big time. And the Lieutenant Governor did speak about some of her policies that she does want to implement, which include ending tenure, fixing roads, slashing property taxes, ending the state income, and more. So all in all, it was a victory for Evitt's campaign. They're very excited. They feel that they can win this runoff in the next couple of weeks against Alan Wilson. So a lot of energy in this room, and the Lieutenant Governor is making her way out of the room now as we speak. But overall, the campaign feels very good about tonight.
We appreciate it. Kind of shaping up as everyone was expecting it to this evening with those two advancing to that runoff. Democrat Jermaine Johnson is going to be on the ballot in November, facing off whoever wins that runoff on June 23rd again, because neither of the candidates received 50% of the vote plus one. We also did have some news with Senator Lindsey Graham winning his primary straight up again, like he has in the past before. So he's seeking a fifth term, and he'll be facing off against Dr. Annie Andrews in November. She's the Democrat nominee. She won her three-way race there, too. Again, their announcements came within 2 hours of those, the polls closing, too. So we're going to have to leave it there. I'm glad we got to pack everything into the past 2 hours. So there's going to be so much more to deal with over the next coming weeks. And we'll be back for a runoff show on June 23rd, starting at 8 p.m. We'll be live for that. So we'll have a lot to talk about on the 23rd. In between then and now, we'll be covering the candidates on This Week in South Carolina and South Carolina Public Radio, as well as the South Carolina Lead podcast. So be sure to tune in. There's going to be a lot to cover the next 2 weeks. From all of us here at South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio, our reporters in the field and our crew behind the scenes, including Amy Crouch, thanks for tuning in and good night.